Well, good morning, everyone. It is November, and I'm sounding a little bit nasally, a little bit cold. I've got my jumper on today. It's November 2021. My name is Alison Pellow. This is yet another one of our hopefully fabulous webinars that we've been running through 2021, through COVID times, picking out different topics that will help employers. Just asking everyone if you wouldn't mind muting yourselves as you join the call, that would be great. And it's so nice to have so many people on the call who have either found us. Tanya found us through the interweb. She found us through Eventbrite. We've got people like Gemma and Kerry and lots of different people. Welcome to Andrew Phillips. Hi there, Julia. So nice to have everyone on call. If you could just use the chat, let me know where you are, maybe a little bit about what job you do, just the job title, just so that Francis and I know how we can focus this discussion, so that we, if you've got any specific questions. So Daniela says she's an L&D specialist and a coach from London. Thank you very much. So I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully you can all see that. So my name is Alison Pellow and we've got Francis with us. For those of you who are in sort of senior-ish positions, learning and development or HR, we do run a VIP members club. Not paid or anything like that. It's just a club where we meet virtually once a month, and we're going to also have a face-to-face meeting, hopefully over a little gin and tonic or something similar. But if you would like to join that, we would please do pop me a message either in the chat privately or send me a message afterwards. And then what we're going to do today is 45 minutes max. Please use the chat function. We will be recording, as you've already heard. And if you could just mute yourself until there's such a time when Francis says, please talk to me, as I'm sure she will. So we'd love your feedback, and we will be sending you a link to say, please, what you thought of the session. So I'm now going to hand over to Francis, who, well, this is nice. We met through kids, didn't we, Francis? Why don't you crack on? Tell us who you are and how we met and all that business.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll just cover what you've got there first so that I'm not dashing you backwards and forwards on your screen. So I'm going to be talking today about maternity leave, how it affects women's careers, a bit of the process about what happens when a woman becomes a mother and why it is so difficult for some women, not all women, to return to work after maternity leave. Next slide, please. And really the focus of this is why, I guess after the last 18 months, why it's now, I think, more important than ever to support women through maternity leave. And it's really key to boosting diversity in organisations based on what's been happening for the last 18 months. So about me, so I met Alison through a school careers fair, and no one ever really knows what they want to do with it. They want me to come along and support, and I'm always happy to, but they normally put me with HR because it feels like a natural fit, and it was a very good fit, and Alison and I have stayed in touch since. And interestingly, what we were talking about that day was a gender pay gap, which we will come on to actually talking a bit about later on today. But my background is in psychology, and I think I've always a psychologist at heart. It's where I approach things. I'm always interested in why we make the decisions we make and what goes on in our brains at different parts in our lives. The majority of my career, I was at PwC and the BBC. I started off in psychometrics and assessing people for roles and promotions. In the BBC, I had a complete career change, worked in news in BBC Weather for a bit, but there I trained as a career coach, and I actually worked in outplacement, supporting people in the BBC who were leaving the organisation. It was at the time of Greg Dyke, so there were loads of redundancies going on then. I have two daughters. I only had one maternity leave because I had redundancy after that. And then I set up my business after my second daughter was about 18 months and really built it up around, it was one of those careers that I built up as my children developed and went to nursery and went to school. So my business kind of developed alongside that. So I'm a registered and licensed career coach. That's my occupation. And I've been working with all different kinds of clients, I'd say, over the last it's about 8 years now that I've been running my business, but my passion is in supporting women through transitions in their careers, and particularly maternity. And that's why I founded the Maternity Coach. I kind of took that part of my business, and the last 3 years, I've really been focusing on that, both on an individual level, but also really importantly in groups. And one of the main groups of people I work with actually is GPs going through maternity leave, and I work with lots of groups of those, and it's just wonderful. I absolutely love it. So that's enough about me. So I thought one place that would be good to start today's session is actually just thinking about women's careers. We tend to think about careers as being a stage process, or there's lots of different models that explain how our careers evolve. But for me, I don't see career paths as gender neutral, and there are quite a few models out there that will support that. What's really important, I think, for women in careers is relationships, the impact of their careers on relationships, and also how their relationships impact their careers. And the different impact that family responsibilities have on men and women is very evident in the careers today. So what we tend to see is that while careers might start off for men and women in a very similar pattern, and it's very much around that kind of challenge and building a career, building salary, status in an organisation, gaining skills, gaining experience, what tends to happen around our mid-careers can be quite different. One of the models that looks at this quite nicely is a kaleidoscope career model by Maniero and Sullivan, and that basically sees a difference at mid-career, that women are more focused on balance and seeing whether their career fits in with other parts of their life, while at this stage in a man's career, they're still very often focused on, are they being their self? Are they using their skills? Are they making the most of what they have to offer? And that actually flips towards a later career, and what we then see is that women are much more looking, when their children have left home, at authenticity, and can they be themselves in their career now that they've got that mind space, that head space, the reduced responsibilities that children bring, that they can then be themselves in their career. Whereas men very often are thinking a bit more about balance then, and looking at how they want to structure their career, maybe towards their retirement.
And I know you mentioned a theory there, so
yes.
just tell us a little bit. Maybe you don't have to go into too much detail, because I know we've only got 40 minutes, but can you just repeat what that theory was?
Yes, it's the kaleidoscope career theory, which is by Maniero and Sullivan.
Okay.
And that's from 2005, but there's a couple of others as well that I think, I'll just mention a couple of parts of a couple of other theories, which I think as well will really resonate with anyone who's been a working mother. One of the, a couple of researchers, O'Neill and Bill and Maria, who are American researchers, but they actually look at that mid-stage of a woman's career and call it pragmatic endurance, which I just thought was fantastic. It's about just women go into production mode, and they're just doing what it takes to get it done, to get through their time at work. They might start to feel a bit dissatisfied and disenfranchised with their workplace if things, they might be stalled at middle management. They might find it hard to find something that fits with their work. And this is where they're at a higher risk of dropping out. And they're tending to measure personal success by happiness and fulfillment, and often their careers aren't bringing this. And that's where you can find that women are looking to find fulfillment in other areas of their life, and that's where we might see women stepping back from their roles. But another great way of looking at it by Wittenberg Cox is this culture shock that women see in their 30s, where we build this momentum in our 20s, and then it's almost like we hit a wall. And at the time where companies are looking to stretch people and test them and develop them for management, women aren't ready for that, because they're at this stage of balance. And so they're at this stage where they momentarily maybe want to be nesting, plateauing, and balancing things. So I think looking at careers and how they're quite different to start with can really help put this kind of perspective, this lens of maternity, layering it on that to see now actually why we can see maternity does have an impact.
But I wonder what, the implications of people having, if the trend is still to do so, having children later in life,
Yes.
and whether there's a socio-economic thing around that. There's, different, maybe different organizations and cultures. There's all sorts of, loads of different pressures on that, aren't there, really?
Yeah. So if you look at the ONS stats, you can see that women in more professional positions tend to have their children later. So you can stretch that kind of period a bit later. But ultimately, and the thing with the kaleidoscope career model is that the authors say that even if a woman doesn't have children, the model still holds. So it's, it feels like it's quite reliable. Looking at the next slide, I've got some of the stats of looking at women at work, where we were at before COVID. And 2019 was the highest level of female employment, and it was 72%. But when you look at that, and some of the research I looked at, I saw that 66% of staff would still leave for better work-life balance. And 50% of staff were thinking that employers should support better work-life balance, and looking at the responsibility of the employer in helping them. And a lot of that's around maintaining boundaries of work, that kind of work life, not extending the working day into those precious hours, I think, that we have in the evening. But for women, one of the things I was reading about, there was that because of work, around a third of women are struggling to sleep at night. It's because they're feeling so overwhelmed by everything, which it's shocking, I think, when you hear about that. But when you keep women in the workplace, companies that have women executives on the board are 10 times more profitable than those without. So I think, even at a bottom line level, if all you're focused on is a bottom line, we really need to help support women to stay in the workplace and progress as they want to.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks. Do you want the next slide?
Yes, please. So the next one is looking at...
Well, I've not heard of this expression before, I'll be honest.
Yeah, so matrescence. So this is actually coined by Alexandra Sachs, which some of you might have heard of. She did a great TED talk, which it's very short, very easy to listen to. So I definitely, if this is your bag, definitely go and have a look at it. But it's basically the process of what happens to a woman when she becomes a mother. And it's probably the biggest identity change that a woman goes through after adolescence, hence why it sounds adolescence, matrescence sounds quite similar. And it's juggling the competing demands of our baby's needs and our own. But I think when we become pregnant as women, we're very aware of what's going on with our bodies. Our belly's growing, we're aware of the new person growing inside us. But what we don't know is that the hormones that are circulating through our bodies are changing everything about us. And I think anyone going through and approaching menopause knows that we have hormone receptors on all parts of our bodies. Our brains actually get changed by the pregnancy hormones to help us adapt and to ensure the survival of our infant. And the structure changes, the activity changes, connections between areas of the brain changes. And the main parts of the most or the biggest changes I think we see are the areas that control anxiety, empathy, and social interaction, and they become more active. And that's what helps us bond to our baby. Also, where all the worrying comes from, I think you'd never met a mum who doesn't worry about something or other. But it's really key, those changes are really key as well to helping us understand that our baby's needs are different to our own. So we get this real shift in priorities, and it starts through pregnancy, and then when our baby's born, it then continues. And research in this area is quite new, so we don't know how long these changes last. But from what I've read, it's easily into, the years after our baby's born. So.
And what about people then? I'm supposing that would peak and trough with people who have maybe lost babies, in between. Maybe they have multiple people that may have difference. If they've got multiple births, there might be all sorts of other bits and pieces going on there as well.
Yeah, definitely. And so some of the changes will only come if you have physically given birth to your baby. But actually, even if you are adopting or, however you come to have your baby, the other key hormone is oxytocin, and that's produced just by having a physical contact with our child. And as long as we have that, even when they're older, we continue to produce that. It's particularly produced during breastfeeding, but it keeps us focused on and makes us feel rewarded by looking after our babies and children. Now, while this is obviously a good thing for our babies, it can be quite counterproductive when we're thinking about returning to work. You can actually experience oxytocin withdrawal, which can lead to anxiety and depression. And I think some of those emotions are going to be present when people are thinking about returning to work. When they are back at work as well, you can still feel that. So I think that's something to bear in mind. If we've got women who are still breastfeeding when they return to work, that there's still a lot of changes that are still present when they're back and trying to be focused on the organizational stuff.
Just a quick question. So Jenna says,
yes.
do we know if dads experience changes due to oxytocin as well?
Yeah, well, oxytocin is produced by close contact. So when you hug your partner, I think if you're face to face and you hug for more than 30 seconds, that gives you a boost of oxytocin and dopamine as well. It's that the hormones that make you feel good, make you feel happy from a hug.
Nice. Okay.
But what we've got then, so we've got these these mothers who have been through this huge change, psychologically and physically, and they're then having to kind of put that to one side, which is very hard, to plan a return to work. And because they've got what Alexandra Sachs says is we've got this pull of our babies of wanting to be with them, which is from a lot of the biological stuff that's going on, but we're also pushed towards the other parts of our identity, so our hobbies, our interests, our friends, our
oh, sorry.
Is that my screen? That's my screen.
No, sorry, that's my screen. Sorry. Bit of it. Lucky there was nothing too horrendous on there.
So we're pushed towards our work, and when we enjoy our work, we really want to get back to it. That's where we can have this kind of real psychological tug of war going on for a mother, and sometimes they can feel overwhelmed by the thought of leaving their baby, even if they really want to go back to work. You can often see mums putting off preparing for work because it just feels too much to deal with.
Yeah, well, when I sent out this email today, just a little reminder, well, thank you to everybody who booked on at the lastminute.comers. Actually, I got a client reply saying, actually, I really think we could do with some of this in our business. I've got a lady who's been off. It's a mixture of everything, COVID and maternity leave, and I know we've been talking to another client about it, just to help those people. I think COVID hasn't helped, in terms of what's happened for people, and they've not been able to get out and socialize, or their babies, or just everything. And that you talk about anxiety, that's just going to be heightened by everything else that's going on, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of mums I talk to, there's when this has been their last maternity leave, they're grieving for that maternity leave they didn't have, because they couldn't get to the clubs they wanted and go out and meet mums and have that support. So there's a lot more going on because of COVID on top of the normal stuff that mums are dealing with. And you also might see mums are less likely to engage in kit days, because although they really want to, it's just that again that block of it's too much to think about. I'm focused on my baby.
Just to clarify, you said kit days, which I know is keeping in touch with days, just in case anyone on the call doesn't know what that is.
Sorry. So looking at the next slide, kind of putting maternity leave into perspective, and again, this is that looking at an average working mother, 3/4 of their working career happens after maternity leave. But I don't think people think about it from that point of view, and we focus a lot on our career pre-maternity leave, without kind of then thinking, well, actually, we've got this big chunk of career. And also the period after our children have left home could be as much as 20 years, depending on how early we've had our children. And the fact that we're probably going to have to work at the moment till we're 70 before we can retire. So it's thinking about how you put this into context and how you make decisions now that are good for the rest of your career, and not just that short-term gain of, just do something quick and easy now so that I can just deal with what I've got going on.
Well, that's really hard, Frances, and I think that's why it'd be great if we could have, I know some of the HR community are on the call. I think it's great that we've got some coaches who can prod people as well, just remind them that is so important for them, because I don't think you can see past the next bloody bottle feed or expressing and all that business that you've got to do when you're a new mum or a new parent, because obviously we did do a session. I just want to put a quick caveat. We've already done a session for dads, so don't worry, dads, or people who are worried about dads. That's what I was just going to go on and try and find the link to that session. So we did do another session. It's not just all about the women, we know.
Yes, but the mums and dads have very different issues, and I think that's the key thing. If you're supporting parents, you can't support them as just one homogenous group. You have to accept that they have different issues and different concerns, and obviously then within a group of women, each mother's going to have different concerns, and that's why if you can tailor the support, that's even better. But from what the research I've seen and my experience of working with women, 88% of mothers experience problems returning to work. And I just
but when you say problems, let's talk it through. So in fact, what can we just ask the audience?
Yes.
Guys, could you tell me, if you think that there's 88% of mothers are experiencing problems, can you tell me please on the chat, what problems do you think people will experience, so that we can see whether there's any patterns? So
don't click on to the next slide, because that's where I do cover.
I won't. Let's see.
Don't give them any ideas.
No, I won't. No, hands are here. So if you could put some stuff in the chat, guys, about loss of confidence, says childcare issue, if the baby's unwell, nightmare. Finding the right hours to fit, guilt of leaving your first child. You might have guilt of leaving every child. The practicalities, lack of support, part-time flexible working arrangements are not always well received. Having to finish on time due to childcare, may not be able to stay late to finish up. I found when I went back, everything was different. The company and me, we were all acting like nothing had changed. Yeah, exactly. Workplace changes that occurred during maternity leave. I mean, something like, working evenings, motivation is impacted, not enough, blimey, it goes on.
Yeah.
And on,
and everything everybody's mentioning is what I hear. Everything.
PND, postnatal that's a really good one.
Gemma's been on the paternity one.
Good. PND, diagnosed late. Yeah, that's really interesting. Resentment around conflicting desires and responsibility, husbands or partners, work not understanding that it's a joint responsibilities, and employers saying they're flexible but not really living that. This is my real experience, says Gemma. Child ill every other week. Oh my God, that's so true, isn't it? You just get them, it's
nursery.
You get them into nursery, you think you're sorted, and everyone
they're ill all the time.
Right, so shall we go to the next slide then?
Yes. So from the mums I work with, so I ask all the mums I work with, they completed a questionnaire, so I can keep track of what people are struggling with. And 93% of mums I've worked with over the last few years, their main concern is juggling work and family life, which I don't think would be a surprise to anybody, and having time to do everything. Managing my career after my return, which I think that's indicative of the fact that women aren't just coming back to work as a nice to have. They want to have a career, they want to engage with their employer, and they want to continue to develop. And very often what happens is people think, oh well, you're a mum now, you won't be interested in a promotion or taking on a new project. And those return to work conversations are so key in setting out for mums what it is that they want when they go back. Maintaining boundaries is huge, and I hear a lot from mums who they say they want to go back, and they say, I'm going to go back 4 days a week. And then on the day that they're not working, you know, they're getting emails or they're getting calls, and, you know, they don't want to be a bad employee. So they end up, you know, doing a little bit. And once you open the floodgate, then you're basically working a day for free.
Yeah, not good. Not good. No,
not good.
You don't need to do that. You do not need to do that. It's easy for me to say that, I know.
Yeah.
But I think you just definitely need to have that, you know, communication with those around you, you know, underneath, beside, above. Absolutely.
Yeah. And finally, the ability to be a good mother. And I think, you know, as mothers, we like to beat ourselves up about everything. And interestingly, I was reading that mums who work full time end up having a better satisfaction than mums who work part time, because of the boundaries. But mums who work part time have better life balance. I think it was something like that. I'll have to look it up. But there was a real distinction between full-time working and part-time working, and how we feel about things.
Yeah.
Next slide, please, Alison.
No problem.
So following on from this, and again, the main concern about having time to do everything, I found this research fascinating. So this is from 2019, and it's looking at jobs around the house. So this is only the tangible physical jobs that we can see, chores. And as we can see, that we haven't moved on much from stereotypes, have we, really? You know, with men's generally putting the bins out and gardening. And
does anyone here watch Strictly? I had to laugh on Saturday night when old Claude, when the news guy, whatever his name is, Dan.
Yes, Dan.
Oh, I shall put the bins out, and Claudia put him straight and said, "It isn't just about the bins, darling."
Although these stats would say otherwise, but I think what this captures is, again, what we think of as the kind of jobs that women need to worry about. But actually, there's a lot more that goes on, and it's the invisible tasks, the mental load that I think is even harder for women. And it's the things that it's hard for a woman to quantify. And, you know, Ian, the paternity coach who you've worked with as well, so we do a lot of joint work together. And one of the things we talk about is that, you know, men and their dads are much more hands-on now than they were when I don't think my dad ever changed a nappy. That, you know, dads are getting involved much more in childcare, but the majority of work that goes on behind the scenes, so the fact that dad's looking after the baby for the day, but he knows if he goes to the cupboard, there'll be nappies, there'll be wipes, there'll be baby grows that fit.
Oh, yeah. Yes,
and a lot of the time, it's the mums. It's not all the time. And I don't want to stereotype. So if any dads are listening who are doing that, I say thank you and tell all your friends. But, you know, the mums they have this mental checklist of making sure they've got the right seasonal clothes in the wardrobe, making sure they've got the right size baby grows. And it's those things, remembering birthdays, and then the admin just ramps up, as you know, when children go to school. And that's, again, when a woman has her mind just bogged down with all of that, can she really give everything at work? When in the back of her mind, she's thinking, did I sign the form for the school trip? You know, and it's hard. It's hard.
It's just from another angle. How do you think, if there's anyone on the call here who is managing someone, let's suggest, who might be coming back from maternity, and in the most sensitive way, how do you think they can have that conversation about, are you present? How are you feeling? You know, is it discriminatory to ask such questions? What do you think?
It's interesting.
Well, I'll be interested to see what do people think. If I'm a manager, put it on the chat. If I'm a manager, or feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like. So Gemma says, I would have welcomed that conversation. Okay. So do you think it's, and how can we have that? What would we say? Or you're back. Can you cope, love? Do you think, I think that's easier for a woman to ask than a man, don't you think? Or am I being sexist? I don't know.
I know that, you know, from when I work with parents doing this, there's an exercise that we do as part of the coaching, and they say that this is the first time they've ever sat down as a family unit and looked at what needs to be done and who does it. And one mum came and she said, I didn't have enough space on the exercise sheet to capture what I did. In fact, Ian had shared some feedback from one of his paternity coaching sessions, and he said one of the dads said he asked his wife if he could see her to-do list, and he said there were 70 things on it, and he was absolutely flabbergasted by how much she had to do that he had no idea about.
Daniela says, what exercise? I think basically
it's one of mine. Yes, it's one of my exercises. Contact me afterwards, Daniela, and we can talk about it.
Michelle says, I think there's a lot of culture change work needed before some bosses are able to do this. A good maternity leave coaching process should include the manager. I completely agree.
Yeah, you got to train the managers as well.
Yeah.
Shall we move on so I don't run you out of time? So here, what I wanted to look at was it's not just difficult, but there's actually a penalty, a financial penalty for a woman being out of the workplace. If you look at the gender pay gap for our 20s and 30s, it's only 1%. But this rises to our 40s, it's 11%. And it continues to increase beyond our 40s. So basically, time out of the labour market affects our future earnings when we return to work. But in Sweden, they found that for every month of maternity leave a father takes, this increases a mother's earnings by 7%. So, it doesn't have to be this way. And for every child that we have, again, the wage penalty of 4% of our salary per child we lose because we've had that child. And they're costing us however much more than that.
Well, Jenna says, one conversation we still need to tackle is job design. From where I sit, most jobs are poorly designed, and even if you have a good manager, the work is still there to reallocate to others. So you might be stuck going back into a role afterwards, and this whole 3-day, 4-day, 5-day, and then relationships have changed, COVID's happened, reorganizations have happened, people are squeezed left, right and centre.
And even as I said, I do a lot of work with GPs, which, as we know, that they work their weeks based on the number of sessions that they do, and you'd think that would be really easy to carve down,
right?
But still, it's down to the practice or the organisation to be flexible. And if we look at then, the final stat there is looking at from February this year, who is economically inactive. People are looking at who's looking after the family at home. We've still only got 0.2 million men and 1.4 million women. So we can see that more women are staying at home to look after the families.
Right. So Jules says, interesting that my wife, who's just returned from parental leave today, in brackets, that's very hot off the press. It's a funny day of the week to go back. But anyway, what am I to judge? Shouldn't all be about Monday, should it? Got promoted and tried to negotiate a higher salary to offset childcare costs, etc., and was refused without discussion. Be interested to know. I mean, that doesn't seem unreasonable to me. Am I bad for thinking that? Tell me. I'm up in the discussion. Francis, you got any thoughts on that?
So I got promoted and tried to negotiate a higher salary to offset it and was refused. So got promoted, but no accompanying salary increase.
No, I think right? Well, I'm assuming she got some promotion salary, the higher salary, but I think I read it that she wanted even more to offset the childcare costs. That's how I read that, but perhaps Jules can confirm for us.
Yes, and no, if a man would have been refused. So actually, the stats that I haven't got the stats to hand, but from what I read, fathers tend to be thought of as needing more, will be more likely to have a pay rise because they're supporting the family.
Right.
I can't remember where I read that, but if anyone else has read that and they let me know, then yes. But so moving on to looking at what's happened over the last 18 months and how.
So I'm just reading the comments. A man wouldn't have that problem as they wouldn't be expected to worry about childcare costs. And then Jules says, I think it's very difficult for women to have those salary increases. I mean, I thought the BBC was a great example of that, those sort of discussions that were happening in the gender way. And then Michelle says, well done for trying anyway. So COVID.
So what happened? Yes, what happened to women in COVID? Well, I don't think, unless you've not read any news, or looked at anything in the last 18 months, you would not be surprised by the fact that women have been more adversely impacted, because I think it's been in all the papers and on all the news. So the job loss was highest in the 25 to 34-year-old group, which is obviously peak childbearing years and coming into that. Women mothers were 1.5 times more likely to have lost their job, quit their job, been furloughed. I think they were also less likely to have received any top-up payments as well. Then these stats. So I found this in a BBC article I was reading. So women spent less time on paid work and more time on housework. But men spent more time eating and sleeping. And in both cases, it was 30 minutes more. So that's how, when we're all at home together, that is how, that I feel really bad for the men on the call. I'm not judging any of you who are here that you did this, but I'm just reporting back what the research says. And even when both parents are at home, mothers spent over an hour a day more on housework than fathers. And I think, you know, there was an article saying how, this is basically saying how much less time is spent on work and why. And then this was despite, so a research report looking into this, and it was the Kantar Public Market Research said that 2/3 of respondents to the survey felt that childcare should be shared equally when both parents are working at home. If we look at the next slide, we can see, so again, why women weren't engaging with work is that they had assumed most of the responsibility for childcare or homeschooling during the lockdowns. That was certainly my own personal experience as well, so I can attest to that. I had to reorganise my work to make sure I was there to supervising the children. But taking a step back and looking at this a bit more objectively, during COVID, a lot of people were forced to make choices based on whose job they needed to protect to pay the mortgage. And with the gender pay gap, with a lot of women being, you know, earning less, and again, it's not the case for everybody, that it was the women's job that was paid less, and so that was the one that had to go to ensure that they had the higher salary to cover all the expenses that were coming out. And I think it was almost a lose-lose situation, you know, that it had to be that way. And I just feel now that we are stepping back, you know, and there was a lot of articles last year about how, you know, has society gone back to the 50s where more women are doing housework and homeschooling, and, you know, the men were doing the majority of the work.
I think what might happen, and it's going to take time, is that the newer parents of today are going to be a bit more cognizant of what has happened, and that they will maybe, I mean, I had a conversation with my husband, you know, years ago about what roles you know, your pink and blue roles, you know, who's two bins, and I was in agreement, and I was happy with that. You know, I think it's about having that discussion with your partner, saying, right, what do we want to do? If these, I know, and times change, and COVID hit, and this and that, and things, but I think somebody else said it's about, you know, communication. It's definitely, and I think with all this coaching, so if you can have this coaching, that's great for individuals, but people must try and also have to take responsibility for themselves and their own domestic discussions. You know, it's not just the employer that, but I think the employer can highlight it.
Yeah, I think you know, equality, what Ian and I always say is you can't have equality at workplace if you don't have equality at home. And, you know, that is really key in being able to have those conversations. But basically, all of the issues that we knew were already going on before COVID has highlighted and basically exacerbated all the existing problems. And it's just shone a light, I think, on what, you know, what women are struggling with. So how can maternity coaching help? I think the key things, how I approach it, are understanding the identity change and boosting confidence, because I think until you can get to grips with that and understand and feel confident about returning to work, it's hard to plan and think about returning. Again, quality at home, can really help equality in the workplace. So helping free, women's mental load, reduce their mental load of worrying about everything. What tends to happen is whoever takes the majority of the parental leave tends to then assume all of the domestic chores, or a majority of them, and a majority of that kind of the invisible task, the hidden workload, and then sees it as their responsibility to solve that as a problem on their own for when they return to work. But actually it's a family discussion that needs to go on about what's going to work for you. And it might be that it does make sense for the family, and they're very happy to make the decision that the mother will step back a little bit for a while. And if we remember going back to women's career paths, it looks like it's more of a natural thing that can happen anyway in that period of their life, but that doesn't necessarily mean that is where they're going to stay. And the later part of a woman's career is much more rewarding. And Margaret Mead, she's an anthropologist who identified postmenopausal zest, where women's careers really come into their own again, and they want to contribute, they want to give something back, and they want to have a meaningful career. And postmenopausal zest.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
I look forward to having some of that.
We'll embrace that.
You get that in a patch?
Oh, you don't need a patch. It comes from here.
Yeah.
So career planning and management is really key, and helping mothers understand that it's not, whatever happens when you return from maternity leave isn't going to be what happens forever, and planning for that and thinking how you want your career to evolve, how you want to manage your career for potentially the 3/4 of your career that's still to come. And for everyone. Did you add that at the bottom?
Yeah, I did, because I think it is for everyone.
Yes.
I think, I just looked at those people, those lovely ladies, and thought, this is for everybody. It's not just for one type of person. It's not for just one sort of job. It's not for one sort of culture. Yeah. I mean, and I think there are cultural differences, and I think that plays a big part of it. Yes. But, we haven't got time to talk about that. You've got equality and diversity. Yes. In terms of, I think that there are stronger conversations need to be had in certain cultures. We'll just leave it at that. I'm not eloquent enough to talk about that, to be perfectly honest. But but I think it is for everybody.
Yeah. So this is what we see when when organisations offer maternity coaching, that we can retain valued employees, and that can be, at every level, that you're building your talent pipeline basically by getting and supporting women back in, reducing recruitment and training costs from having to replace mothers who don't return, helping employees to feel more engaged and improve their well-being, as we've seen, narrow the gender pay gap. And a lot of the things that we can do, you need to support, again, both sides. So if you're supporting women, supporting the men as well, as we've seen from the research in Sweden, that by giving fathers more parental leave, it actually helps benefit a woman's career. We're creating role models that that for a younger woman joining an organisation, that it is possible that you might be able to stay with this organisation if that's what you want, and reach senior management level, because they will support you to do that. They can see a mother able to do that kind of work at a high level. And again, it's creating diversity at work. And I think even more importantly, it's diversity of thought. The benefits of having a balanced, gender balanced workplace all the way up to the board level, we can see it has a massive impact on the bottom line, having women at senior levels. So there we go.
Fantastic. Okay, so we did 11:46, so not too late, but we'd love to stay on the line. So if anyone's got any questions, please pop it in the chat. Michelle's wondering what happens when she's 60, if she's going to get that zest. I think that's her main concern. Thanks, Daniela. Yeah, hopefully you've linked into me. That would be brilliant. Gemma, thanks for saying you'd like to be in the VIP club. But is there any other questions? We've got a fantastic presentation. Are many other organisations doing this? Do you find, Francis, I'll start with a question, but please do all put your questions into the chat. Oopsie, microphone lost there. You know, do you see specific organisations that tend to enjoy this type of stuff?
I think, you know, it's been in, you know, big organisations for about 15 years. I know Ernst & Young, you know, they had a massive, if you look up potentially, they, you know, there's a massive project that they did by bringing in maternity leave. It tends to be, sorry, maternity coaching. The larger organisations you'll find offer it, but I'm finding now it's filtering down. And looking at the clients who've come to me recently, there are smaller organisations who are looking to support maybe a couple of people a year, which I think is fantastic, because, you know, they're doing it genuinely because they want to support the individuals and not because it's a big PR point or, you know, it's a marketing thing. It's, you know, they genuinely want to support individuals. And as I said, you know, GPs, I'm supporting huge numbers of GPs. I'm taking on, you know, 8 associates to support the number that we're looking at next year, because, you know, there's a huge issue with retaining GPs in their 30s, female GPs in their 30s, which is, you know, causing a massive loss of GPs in the workforce.
Joe says matrescence.
Matrescence, or Alexandra Sachs.
There we go. That was the person. That's what she's looking for. And then somebody's put, Jules, thank you very much. She's put a useful link from YouTube on there. Anne-Marie says, thank you very much. Anne-Marie, you've been to a couple of our events and you've registered and got colleagues from your organisation. So lovely to have you on the line today. See, even the legal firms, they need help. Even them. Maybe they need more, who knows. Thank you very much. She says it's given us definitely some food for thought. So unless there's any more questions, it just remains really just to say thank you so much, Francis.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
You've been brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Really interesting to hear. We'll be. I'll look at the chat, and you know, any organisations that are interested in coaching that will come through People Vision, we'd love to work with you guys. If you've got any questions, you can contact me directly, and Francis will work with you on that. Anything else from you, Francis?
No, just thanks for having me. And, you know, if anyone's got any questions, they know where I am.
I will be sending out a link. We put this into PDF, the presentation. We put it into PDF and then we put it on our website. And then we also make this into a podcast and then we send that out, blah, blah, blah. So we will do that in the next sort of 24 hours. So Andrew looks relatively keen on that. So he might even share that podcast with other people. That would be great. And we're on Spotify. We even got a download once. But listen, thanks so much for all your lovely comments, and it's been brilliant to see you all the best.
Thanks, Alison.
Thank
Lovely.
you.
Thank you. Thanks, Francis.